Welcome back to a further episode of Men's Inner Health with Mark Randall. Today's episode is on anger. We men are well known for our anger. Anger is an emotion, violence is a behaviour. Is it a habit? I believe it is a habit, a well-worn habit that we've used for eons. And society is now calling it out. Is it really necessary to have the amount of anger that we guys have had over the years? Probably not. However, whether we've been conditioned, whether we're sort of biologically wired, yes, the reptilian brain is fight, flight, freeze, food, fornicate. The amygdala is the fear receptor. Closely aligned to that is the hippocampus, the long-term memory center. All traumas, or not all traumas, but yeah, a lot of traumas are stored in that long-term memory center next to the amygdala, and as soon as old memories come back, the nervous system switches on, the sympathetic nervous system switches on, and we're in defense mode. Defend, protect. We may have needed it years ago. How much of our anger has been modeled from forefather to forefather? I suspect a lot of it's been modeled. Rather than feel our vulnerability, rather than feel those uncomfortable emotions, how much of that are we converting to anger? How much of our own anxiety are we converting to anger? Anger at the world, but probably more anger at ourselves, which is another topic. Learning to curtail anger, learning to soothe anger, learning to better manage anger. Yes, anger is, as I said before, it's a normal, healthy emotion. There's healthy use of anger. It can provide, we can assert boundaries. If people are violating our boundaries, how do we assert the setting of those boundaries and maintaining those boundaries? How do we use healthy anger to motivate ourselves? Sometimes we need to kick ourselves out the door, that procrastinator. We can get a tad lazy sometimes. How do we use healthy anger to give ourselves a slight tap out the door rather than kick and the living shit out of ourselves out the door? And anger historically isn't easy to work with. It takes practice. It's really important to look at what is underneath our anger. What are the other emotions? What are the other experiences that may be sitting under anger? And I believe we men have learnt to convert all those difficult emotions, those painful emotions, into anger. I also believe we've learnt to convert our anxiety into anger. When we're anxious, we're nervous, when we're running late, we're going to get pissed off at the traffic. Everybody, they're all going too slow. Is it really the traffic's fault, or is it really my fault that I choose to be running late and getting anxious that I'm going to be late for the appointment? In the Flow Research Collective course that I did, they talked about being stoically late. Sometimes things are outside of our control, and rather than be anxious about it, how do we just stay in flow and be stoically late? That is, it's accepting the anxiety rather than getting pissed off about it or frustrated. How do we slow the gears down a little bit and just be stoically late? In therapy, over the years, a lot of men have come to me for anger management, and yes, we can do the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, on anger management, but are we just managing the anger? How do we heal what's underneath the anger? What does anger internally cost you? What does it cost you in your relationship? What does it cost you in your relationship to your children? Yes, as men, our bark is worse than our bite sometimes. And sometimes with our children, we do need to if they're in unsafe positions, we need sometimes, we're going to jump to anger and protect them as best we can. And if we men have got this perpetual defaulting to anger, what's that like for yourself? What's it like for your partner? What's it like for your family to be in a 6-foot radius of that stuff? Over the years, we've been asked and told, hey, it's not okay to spray people with our anger, and when I'm pissed off, and when I'm asking, hey, how does that feel? Oh, I'm pissed off. Well, or I'm frustrated. Or isn't frustration, if we really take a deep dive, isn't frustration and annoyance, aren't they also part of that angry emotion? They're just maybe different degrees of that anger. Underneath anger, I use what's called the iceberg model as a handout. Now, the iceberg above the ocean, above the sea level is anger. Then underneath that, there are a stack of other labels of different emotions: disappointment, sadness, helplessness, powerlessness, sadness, loneliness, fear, hunger, etc., etc. Now, learning to change our anger, do we need to take a deep dive and start looking at some of those uncomfortable, deeper emotions that are sitting inside there? Helplessness, powerlessness. What does anger bring? Anger in our body brings a form of power, but is that power with, or is it power over? Generally, it's power over. How do we learn to have power with? How do we learn to surrender emotionally to these deeper emotions that live within our system? There's the vagal nerve, the polyvagal theory. There's the vagal nerve that runs from the brainstem all the way through the body, through the major organs. Emotions are neurochemicals that live in the body, and the vagal nerve is feeding everything back up to the brainstem. And the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, switched on into fight or flight. Learning to connect and to surrender and to get to know the emotions underneath our anger, learning to get to know the subtle nuances of our anxiety and how that plays out in our lives, learning to be with our sadnesses, our disappointments, our failures. As men, we are taught to suppress any emotional feelings, any form of emotionality. I can't cry because that's not cool as men to cry. I can't be vulnerable. That's not cool as men to. However, is it really? Is crying, is being vulnerable just part of our innate humanness? It is. The more we learn to surrender into and begin to emotionally process some of these deeper feelings of powerlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, failure, sadness. Maybe that sadness, that might trigger a whole history of sadnesses, and those sadnesses may come from a history of childhood trauma, if that's been the case. Now, that trauma doesn't just go away. It may leave the working memory of our brains, but it can get lodged back into the hippocampus, the long-term memory center, and that's closely aligned to the amygdala. And any threat of old trauma, can we then go into defense mode? Yes, we can. Rather than try and hold the defense mode back, well, how do we go in and do the healing on that old trauma? How do we grieve these sadnesses instead of converting them to anger or being pissed off? Oh, it pisses me off. It does piss us off. Granted. Learning to process these emotions is a form of healing. And as we get better at processing the emotion, we can begin to notice that deeper feeling. I know what this is. I can track this back, timeline it back. Oh yeah, that's an old pain point. Stop, notice it, take a time out, walk away. One of the things in conversations, our brains are a bit differently wired, male and female brains. In women's brains, the corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres, is thicker, and women can think and feel at the same time. They also have 7 communication centers in their brain, and I believe we've only got 2, and the corpus callosum in our brain is not as, so we can't multitask, and we can't think and feel at the same time. We need to go and think about how we feel, and timing, having time outs is really important. And because women can think and feel, and they have been able to process their emotions, they've got more intuitive wisdom of what emotions within themselves are being triggered. We don't. we're back to square one. And it's how do we learn to begin to take the deep dive and explore these emotions, heal these emotions. And the ultimate goal with that is the more we heal those, we can communicate them differently. We can, instead of converting them to anger, we can delineate what they are, and we can start having conversations about those experiences. We can talk about the disappointment. We don't need to be pissed off about it. We can talk about the disappointment. And if the disappointment is really deeply painful, we are vulnerable in it. And how might we need to emote that vulnerability? Your wife or your partner is not going to judge you for it. Rather than convert it back to anger or being pissed off or being frustrated, deep dive underneath that anger. The more you heal these emotions underneath this pissed offness, how would that improve your well-being in your body and in your mind? When there's anger in our psyche, we cannot have anger in our psyche with happiness. Anger and happiness don't live together in the psyche. We can't have one without it just doesn't work. And if we're always pissed off, by looking underneath, can we start to create more room for happiness and beautiful emotions, positive emotions, to start flowing through the system? We can. When you're angry, when there's anger in your body, how high is your stress levels? How much cortisol and adrenaline are you pumping through your system? Well, where's your rest and digest, your parasympathetic nervous system? It's offline. What's that stress like? And because we're now, and it's great that we are being asked to take responsibility for our anger and our rage, rather than just internalize it for like an internal combustion. How do we that's not pleasant to live with. The moods, in old psychotherapy terms, that internal combustion, that mood is, where's the anger in that depression? What a gift to be able to give to yourself, to be able to really learn, notice the early warning signs of our anger. Because the more we get the early warning signs, then we've got more breathing space to notice it, stop it, hold it in its tracks, and do a bit of self-reflecting into what's underneath this. Those nanoseconds are really important because, when we're frustrated, we might be 3 or 4 on the scale, yeah, one more tick and we're over the edge, then we're roaring, spraying. And that's not okay. Learning to heal what's underneath anger is the best form of anger management there can ever be. What a gift to give to yourself, firstly. And that gift will then flow on to your partner, to your family, to your friends. And the more we clear this out, can we make more room for more flow in our lives, more happiness in our lives, more joy in our lives. What a beautiful gift. Be gentle and enjoy.